Bismillah. Peace and blessings, everyone. Hope everyone is well on this Tuesday evening. The date is October the 8th, 2024. Peace and blessings. My name is Bilal, Imam Bilal, live here with your On Point Weather Report forecast update. We went live yesterday to discuss the latest forecast analysis in reference to Hurricane Milton and its arrival and making landfall in the state of Florida. That was last night, and wanted to share where we are currently in reference to Hurricane Milton. We asked that you share this live stream to your pages, to your groups. If you have friends or family members in the state of Florida, share this information as well. And if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to drop them in the chat, in the comment section, the chat section, comment section, and we'll get right to them in a timely fashion as much as we can tonight. Hurricane Milton has re-strengthened back to a Category 5 hurricane status. Last night when we came to you, wa alaikum assalam, Brother Anthony. Thank you for joining. Last night when we came live, we discussed where Milton was in terms of his status. Last night's status, we had a Category 5 hurricane as well. It went through a stage what we call restructuring in terms of its eye wall, and the location, the center of the location of the eye went through overnight last night into this morning, went into a phase of restructuring. Hence, there was some weakening, but now it's re-strengthening, or it has re-strengthened back into a Category 5 status. Still a little ways away from the state of Florida from making landfall. That just to put some things into perspective, we're going to bring up some of the guidance as regards to the latest advisories that have been posted for Milton. We all started getting some feedback from the ground in Florida that places have started boarding up and have boarded up. It is Tuesday night, so Milton is expected to make landfall tomorrow afternoon. So whatever preparations you have not completed, you should be rushing to completion tonight. Because throughout today, overnight tonight, throughout tomorrow morning, the weather in these areas will steadily start to deteriorate. So the faster you complete your work in terms of your preparation will have to take place tonight. In regards to preparation, so the things we're hearing on the ground from beat residents in Tampa, specifically in the Tampa area, depending on what flood evacuation zone that you live in, you've been told, some area residents have been told that they have to evacuate, mandatory evacuation in some of the areas, low-lying areas, coastal areas of Tampa. That's number one. Number two, you also have been told that for the residents that are a ways away from the water bodies, have not been told to evacuate. They've been told, wa alaikum assalam, Brother Sufyan, good to see you. They have been told not to evacuate. They have started boarding up their residencies and those types of preparation. The other component is that while we talked to some of the residents in Tampa, we were reminded of some of the geographical shape of the land in terms of Tampa, Sarasota, and things of that nature. They basically lie below sea level. And there's definitely what keeps them afloat is the Bay Area. The body of water that separates the cities is nothing but water, and there's nothing but a small bridge or a bridge between the two cities. Outside of that is just water. And this is the concern for the area in terms of its preparation in terms of its vulnerability. Its vulnerability to the power of storm surge, which we will see some of those impacts. Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Ibn Tamir Abdul Mutakabir. Thank you for joining as well. We will see those type of impacts in the state of Florida and specifically Tampa. So we talked to some of the residents of Tampa today to get a pulse as to what is happening in Tampa area. We also see some shifts in the track of the hurricane system that could bear some favorability in the favor of not a direct landfall in Tampa. But nevertheless, and I can't stress this enough, last night we talked about some of the impacts that will be stretching out past just Tampa and Sarasota, going into Orlando and further inland, that they will have to deal with heavy rain, flooding in the urban areas in the communities, and also wind damage. Power will go out in these areas. You need to check up on your folks in these regions to make sure that they're prepared, phone numbers and etc. But power will go out. I mean, it's just a matter of when that happens. But in terms of wind damage from category 3 or 4 hurricanes, we're talking about trees being toppled like toothpicks and all it takes is trees to fall on power lines to knock out power to residents. It's not something, rare. These things happen. So we're expecting that you will not be able to speak to anybody during this storm from tomorrow, potentially for a few weeks, because this might take a while for power to be restored, depending on the scope of the damage and just the overall response is going to require the state of Florida and others to provide relief to these areas upon clearance. We also talked, and remember, we're going to go back to the geographical location, or the top, how the land is shaped in the state of Florida, which is mainly, I was told, limestone. And if you know anything about these rocks, certain rocks like this have a lot of holes in them, which creates the high water table that allows for Florida to flood, and what's holding up a lot of areas is being held up by limestone, and it really doesn't have much of any formidable solid structure that's holding these places up. Most of the homes on the beaches are held up by this particular rock. And those structures are vulnerable for these kind of events, and this kind of intensity is not built to last and to go up against these kind of situations. So that's why this makes it a very serious situation in this part of Central Florida, and the impacts that we felt all throughout the state going into tonight and to specifically tomorrow when we see the landfall from Milton in this region. Shout out to Jonas, the Quebecers from Canada. Pray for Florida. It's our second home. Stay safe. And we love you all. Thank you, Jonas, for that. We definitely join in prayer as well with those who will be impacted from Hurricane Milton as well. So thank you for sharing that prayer, Jonas. Now, we want to get to the latest information. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat box, and we'll get to them as well tonight. Briefly, we're not going to stay too long tonight, but we wanted to bring the latest to you, so to answer any questions that we can tonight. So we're going to pull up the latest here. Here we are. Latest track, Hurricane Milton. This is as of 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Let me make myself a little smaller. Let me pop up down. There we go. We have the storm system, again, major hurricane status, category 5, maximum sustained winds of 165 miles per hour, moving east-northeast at 9 miles per hour. Subject to make landfall now between, it's just slow down a little bit. The timing of a landfall has gone back some. Wednesday at 1 o'clock, the hurricane will be sitting just right about here. And between Wednesday night overnight around 1 a.m. Thursday morning, we will see a landfall. Between, again, Wednesday night and Thursday morning at 1 a.m., we'll potentially see a landfall of Milton in the state of Florida at that time. It will cross the state, central portion of the state, as a major hurricane, category 3 or 4, and cross through the state from the east side to the west side. That's why these watches earlier were now been updated to hurricane warnings on the west side, because category 1 hurricane or hurricane status will still be a hurricane. Milton will still be a hurricane throughout its duration moving across central Florida, and then eventually out to the Atlantic Ocean, and then eventually way out towards sea, becoming a threat possibly to Bermuda. But by that time, it would be a tropical storm, not a hurricane. So this is the latest track for Milton as we speak. I also want to go over some of the key messaging. Some of the key messaging in terms of what's the latest from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, straight from the National Hurricane Center. As of tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern, we'll have some newer content. Let me see, should be arriving shortly. In fact, let me check and see if we have that. No, I think the latest, yep, that is the 4 p.m. advisory is the latest one right now. Soon one will be coming out shortly with the latest, but nevertheless, we'll work with what we have tonight. Right now, some of the key messaging. The large area destructive storm surge with highest inundations of 10 feet or more is expected along a portion of the west central coast of Florida Peninsula. If you are in the storm surge warning area, this is an extremely life-threatening situation, and you should evacuate today if ordered by local officials. There will likely not be enough time to wait to leave on Wednesday. Excuse me. Devastating hurricane force winds are expected along portions of the west coast of Florida, where a hurricane warning is in effect. Milton is forecast to remain a hurricane as it crosses the Florida Peninsula, and life-threatening hurricane force winds, especially gusts, are expected to spread inland across the peninsula. Preparations to protect life and property, including being ready for long-duration power outages, should be complete by tonight. Heavy rainfall across the Florida Peninsula through Thursday brings the risk of catastrophic and life-threatening flash and urban flooding, with moderate to major river flooding, especially in areas where coastal and inland flooding combine to increase the overall flood threat. Lastly, tropical storm conditions and dangerous storm surge with destructive waves will continue across portions coast of the Yucatan Peninsula this evening. So let's look at the peak storm surge, which is the major threat for Hurricane Milton. I can't express it enough that this is going to be what is the major concern for the eastern portion of the state. The western portion of the state, and then to the east. So the storm surge expecting from the Tampa Bay area until down into Charlotte Harbor, anywhere between 10 to 15 feet of waves, 10 to 15 feet of water inundation coming into this region. And locally, it could be potentially even be higher than this. But this is 10 to 15 feet of water inundation coming into the Tampa Bay area and Charlotte Harbor. And then around 8 to 12 feet in this red in around Bonita Beach area. I guess less 5 to 8 down to Chokoloshki, and then less down to Flamingo and down to the Florida Keys, where there will be impacts, but not as much in the way in terms of life-threatening storm surge as the central portion of the state will experience, especially around the Tampa Bay area and Charlotte Harbor. Again, the further north you go, less of impacts in terms of storm surge will be less deadly. But anywhere in this purple color is where we're going to have that 10 to 15 feet of water coming in to this area from the being pushed into from the Gulf and the Bay coming further inland. That's the main threat for storm surge, which is by far the most concerning of Milton, is that storm surge. It's the most concerning portion of the storm that could potentially prove to be catastrophic in terms of what is left after this storm system passes by. That's the major concern. The other concerns that we talked about is the flash flooding, the risk of heavy rain. The color in pink are pretty much certain, with high certainty, that we will see major flooding Tampa all the way to Orlando. From Tampa Bay all the way into Orlando, that we will see urban inland flooding threat, that it will flood. These areas will flood. And that itself will prove to be devastating in terms of property and potentially in terms of life, that people who choose to stay between Tampa and Orlando and have not left Tampa or Orlando, which Orlando, from my understanding, is not under any mandatory evacuations. As of this point, I have not heard. Parts of Tampa are under mandatory evacuations. So this proves to be something of serious nature and would require serious intention to leave these areas if you can, to go further north if you can. And I'm hearing that the traffic was insane on one of the interstates leaving out of these area of Tampa. Gas, I heard, is down low, or in some places no gas left, which proves to be that more than likely no gas, and gas runs out, you're not going anywhere unless you have a full tank of gas yourself already in your car, because you will not be able to fuel back up in some of these places where the gas has run out because of people who already have left these areas to go other places away from the center of circulation, mainly, again, points northward and in some points southward to get away from the landfall of Milton. We're concerned with flooding, getting with the red 50% flood threat south of Tampa into Sarasota and places south of that, and also places north, just a little bit north of Orlando, will also have a 50% chance. Anything in the yellow, around 30% chance of flooding. That's Jacksonville, parts of Miami, Key West, West Palm Beach, etc. These areas are also under a risk of seeing some urban flooding, and it won't take much for some of these places to flood. And we've seen flooding in these areas before because of the high water table and of limestone, that these areas tend to flood as well. So even though there won't be a direct landfall in Miami or Key West or West Palm Beach, does not leave you out from seeing some urban flooding in even in these areas. But definitely the focus and attention will be on the Central Florida in terms of where the direct landfall will be. So that is the risk over the next 3 days for flash flooding in around the central portion of the state of Florida. The wind is going to be arrival wind times. Charlie's tropical storm ports winds is scheduled to arrive Wednesday afternoon between around 2 o'clock along the shore western side of the state of Florida, and then by progressively towards Wednesday night, we'll start feeling tropical storm force winds from Orlando and Norfolk towards Jacksonville and Southport, even towards Miami and etc. Tropical storm force winds. That's just minimum 45, 50 mile per hour winds. That's just at the bare minimum. That central portion of the state going to have to deal with 75, 85, 100 mile per hour winds easily coming in that path of the landfall, and it's going to cut straight through Central Florida. So you're going to feel those winds even further inland. And that's the other portion of the concern for the inland areas is the wind and the rain, which is wind and flooding, wind damage and flood damage as well. So that's the wind forecast. I wanted to, let me see here, bring up some of the discussion in terms of the track. Remember, we talked about the track earlier and its wobbling of nature, which is typical for these storms to make wobbles at the last minute. That's not unheard of with storms like this. Let me see. So the models have taken into a lot of different probabilities and chances for landfall. And right now, the shift of the storm, because the storm has shifted, because of the eye wall being reformed, which we'll show right now. Let's show the structure. Let's bring up the structure so you could see what we're talking about. Let's do satellite imagery. And let's go into the Gulf of Mexico with an image. Oh, yes, this is it right here. Very refined eye has formed now. It was smaller in size, slightly not as refined last night when we looked at it. We looked at it last night. It had a little pin in it. Now you can clearly see it. You can clearly see the eye, and it's very much formed. That's because the system went through an eye wall reformation overnight and has formed a very closely defined eye wall, which means that it's strengthened or re-strengthened back into the category 5 status. It looks very healthy at this point of time, as it makes its landfall as it prepares to make its landfall in the state of Florida. So that's to show you the imagery and give you a sense of how big the storm system is and how much terrain it will cover the whole state, basically from north to south, in terms of some sort of impacts will be felt no matter where you live. But again, the major catastrophic impacts, central portion of the state from Tampa all the way into Orlando and points eastward from there. We talked about, again, I talked a little bit about the models. What the models do, they take probabilities and equations and put them all together. We get sort of this like spaghetti chart looking graphic with various different possibilities from various different computer models that are weather models that are looked at to see where is this landfall going to take place. Again, Can't stress it enough. South, north, doesn't matter where Milton ends up. The impacts will still be felt. And the other portion of concern of talk is, oh, how strong is it? What's the category? What's the category strength? At this point, is irrelevant. I said it last night. We get too hung up in the jargon of category strength. It's a major hurricane. Anything above a 3 status, it's major. A 5, 3, 4, 5. We're talking, of course, the different wind speeds, yes, but in terms of its impacts, it's going to be measured by the storm surge. Its impact will be measured by the storm surge. That's really the most important piece of information tonight. And it has been the talk, but a lot of times the information, sometimes it becomes very overwhelming to try to feel through the information as it's being talked about. So sometimes we get caught up in the jargon of, oh, well, is it a 5? Is it a 6? Is it this? Is it that? That's not the stressor point. The stressor point for tonight of concern is that storm surge. How much water is going to come inland from that Bay Area if you're living in Tampa and Sarasota and St. Pete? While the storm shift system right now has shifted its track a little south of Tampa and St. Pete, you still will see impacts with wind, rain, flooding. Can't stress it enough. This is a very serious situation, brothers and sisters, family and friends. Please check up on your loved ones and see how they're doing. Hopefully they have heeded any mandatory evacuations, and have left this region, this area, and to higher grounds away from the center of circulation, away from the landfall. So that's the latest with Milton, in terms of the details of Milton. And I meant to share the probability. So the probabilities of a landfall, say for instance, in a city like Sarasota right now, is looking like a 60% chance that Sarasota around Sarasota will be where the direct landfall will be. 63% around Osprey, Venice, 60%, Punta Gorda, 57%, Tampa, St. Pete, 53%, Fort Myers, 47%, Naples, 33%. So anywhere between Sarasota and Tampa, still in the line of fire. Tampa to Sarasota. Sarasota right now and Osprey look like where somewhere where that eye wall will make landfall. And last night, remember, we did mention of the right front quadrant. Where that eye will make landfall is where that right front quadrant of the storm will be catastrophic. That right front quadrant is where the strongest winds of the hurricane is, and where the strongest storm surge occur. That right front quadrant. So where that right front quadrant makes landfall that's what we'll be dealing with. That's what we'll be dealing with in terms of the results of the storm. Can't stress it enough that if you're living in Sarasota, between Sarasota and Tampa, please heed any warnings of evacuation. Leave if you can. This is mandatory. Please leave. Can't stress that enough. That is very important, because what's about to happen is something that this region of Florida has not seen a storm like this since 1921. the records say that Tampa and the area around Tampa has not seen a direct hit from a hurricane of this nature since 1921. A long time, over 100 years we're talking. So this is shaping up to be a major situation for Tampa, Sarasota, and points between, and even points eastward into Orlando. Any questions? We're taking questions tonight. Are there any questions in terms of Milton? Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and appreciate the supporters for taking some time out to tune in and hear this message. So please share this live stream, share this information to your networks in relations to what's going on with Milton. Okay, so we have a question. What about St. Petersburg, Florida? Hi, Auntie. Yeah, so St. Pete, we just talked about Tampa, St. Pete area being still in the scope of a landfall, in terms of a direct landfall. Right now, it looks like Sarasota will be 65% chance of a landfall there, but 60% chance of a landfall still still for Tampa, St. Pete, Tampa Bay and St. Pete area. So the concern is still the bullseye between Tampa Bay area, the Tampa Bay area, which includes St. Pete, down to Sarasota, is still the bullseye. There is very little room for wobbling. There's wobble room for the hurricane. It could wobble and not hit Tampa and St. Pete, which is what the model guidance is saying, that's going to move just south of Tampa and St. Pete, and somewhere around Sarasota be a landfall. But the wobble is like it's hard to project or predict where that will be. That's why it's very important to heed whatever warnings are out for that specific area. Tampa and St. Pete, there's been areas that have been warned to leave with mandatory evacuations, depending on what zone that you live in. So if you live closer to the water, we're more than likely told or have been told to leave the area. If you live further away, I'm hearing that not so much. There's not been a mandatory call for evacuations, and some people are willing to, wait it out. I wouldn't advise it. I wouldn't advise that, just because if you are even inland, further away from the water, you're still going to have to deal with wind speeds 100, 110, 120, 130. This is going to be not just a coastal event, but even even an interior event, land-wise, from Tampa inland all the way to Orlando, is going to have to deal with wind and rain. So flooding damage is going to be likely, and then you're also going to have to deal with your structural damage, depending on how your structure is built. And if it's built to withstand that kind of wind. And Category 3, Category 4 hurricane, that's tough to withstand. And then structure-wise, and most structures that I have built have not been built to withstand that capacity in terms of that type of wind. So, if you're in Tampa, St. Pete, and in Sarasota tonight, your wrap up for all of your preparations have to be completed. If you're not completed your preparations and your evacuation, you need to do so by tonight, because by tomorrow everything is going to start steadily going downhill. Landfall projected to be around 1 a.m. Thursday morning. somewhere between Tampa and Sarasota at 1 a.m. But that doesn't the conditions will start deteriorating. You're gonna start feeling tropical force winds by tomorrow morning, by no later than lunchtime. You're gonna start seeing rain coming in. You'll start seeing some activity, but the bulk of the activity is going to happen as the afternoon progresses and gets worse into the night. And then by 1 a.m., we're talking about a landfall at some point in between Tampa and Sarasota. Hard to pin right now where that will be, that landfall, but 10 to 15 feet of storm surge is no joke. Like, that's a lot of water coming in to a area where is high water table already, so it already easily floods. It easily floods these areas in Florida. So that's the concern about what that looks like. And it could be locally even higher amounts from 10 to 15, could be even 20 feet. I won't be surprised someone gets 20 feet reading comes out of this, which is crazily insane. That's a lot of water coming in. And that wind is just going to push it in. It's going to push all that water in. So can't stress it enough. This is going to be a dangerous situation, not to take lightly. Please try to heed the signs, heed the warnings, and if you can, leave if you can do so. Any other questions? We'll take any more questions here tonight, so we'll take any more questions. We'll come back on tomorrow with another update to see where we are in terms of Milton, if it has weakened or not, because we should start seeing that downgrade or weakening trend slightly soon. But I here to tell you, all that doesn't really matter. It's not going to matter in terms of the storm surge if Milton weakens to a Category 4 or 3 hurricane. It's a moot point. But we're curious to see if it does not weaken to a Category 3 or 4, and if it comes in as a Category 5, which would be, wow, devastating. If it's not even a word to use, it's just wow, because somebody on that coastline of Florida is going to get a reading of 150 mile per hour wind. Like, that's just going to be insane, insanely intense. So we'll see what the downtrend, or when that downtrend starts to take place. Again, landfall is not projected to be sometime late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, around 1 o'clock in the morning or so. So there is time for Milton to do some weakening of sort. But we'll see, because the environment it's in it's quite conducive for development, and we'll see if there's any upper level wind shear that's going to knock some of those thunderstorms down a little bit or what. So we'll see what that looks like tomorrow when we reconvene, and we'll see what the readings come in tonight. There'll be another check tonight. Another advisory comes out shortly, and then another advisory will come out in the morning tomorrow, and we'll see where everything stacks up in terms of that. But in terms of leaving and preparation and all of those important things, that should have already been done. And right now we are in the last few hours or so before the landfall. All right, everyone, let's keep our brothers and sisters and family members, etc., the people of the state of Florida, especially Central Florida, keep them in prayer tonight, and continuously keep them in prayer throughout this ordeal. And may they be make it out and safe and in one piece from this situation. This is unprecedented time and an unprecedented situation, and we pray for the best possible outcome in terms of the preservation of life, preservation of property as much as possible, but definitely the preservation of life in terms of people's lives being safe tonight, and going through the system as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, please like and share this information to your networks, and etc. If any have any question, feel free to leave it in the chat box, and we'll get back to you in due time. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been great. Again, thank you to all those who tuned in, and those who have watched, and those who have commented and asked questions. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a great restful rest of your evening. Peace and blessings. Good night.